with my folks from TBLC, whether it is in person or online. And for those who are wondering, Vicki and I were chatting. The last thing I did before the world shut down in March was I was with TBLC, literally as the world was shutting down. So we're sort of bookending 2020 in a good way this year. And I'm really excited to be here talking a little bit about PR 101, but also how can we improve public relations as part of the marketing and communications that we do with our libraries. And I'm going to try to be interactive, so definitely keep an eye. We're going to chat. We're going to have questions in the chat. I'm going to ask you some things, and there are going to be some group exercises because I want this to be, hands-on. I want us to get practice and dive into some PR aspects and communication aspects while we're here today in this workshop. I am going to go ahead and turn my video off just in case I'm less distracting, but I wanted to wave and say hi to my Florida pals and my TBLC folks, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. So one of the things that I want everybody to know is that marketing and PR, that library marketing PR, I have a pet peeve around PR and its use by a lot of the folks in the library world. And mostly it's because the terms get confused a lot and mixed up, and our practice and our expectations can get out of whack. And knowing the differences between what we can expect from PR and what we can expect from other parts of the marketing cycle gets those expectations back in control. And that's what we're here to fix today and to talk about the basics of PR, building good media relations, where PR fits in the marketing cycle, what PR can and maybe it can't do for you, and some best practices as well as basic elements in a PR kit for your library. So those are the differences. Those are the learning outcomes here. That's what we're hoping to get to today. A little bit more just about my bona fides and backgrounds, and that we skipped over the fact that I do actually have an MLS. It's from Drexel University outside of Philadelphia. And then I went ahead and spent 5 more years in IMLS funded scholarship in information studies, also at Drexel, before I came to my senses and decided that I could teach in other capacities. The other thing that a lot of folks seem to know me for, and I think I even recognize maybe a few names here, is that I'm the founding president of the nonprofit that runs the Library Marketing and Communications Conference. We just wrapped up our 6th conference and our first ever virtual conference last week. And I'll also throw in the plug, there were fantastic sessions. If you want recordings only access to those sessions, message me. They are still available through the month of November. So this is a slide, and if you've been with me in any sessions, I'd love to know, drop in the chat if you have attended any of the other webinars, workshops in person that I've done with TBLC. But I now use this slide everywhere because it's just that important and foundational, no matter what we're talking about in terms of marketing. And especially in terms of when we're talking about PR and public relations and media relations, community relations are all part of PR. We have to ask ourselves, why are we doing this in the first place? Why are we communicating? Why are we creating a flyer? Why are we on social media? Why are we sending that press release? What's our goal? What's our goal for the piece? What's our goal for the library? And to always keep in mind, why should my community care? Why are they going to care about this piece of marketing communications that we are putting out? And this is absolutely crucial to ask, why should my community care? Because it's what every journalist, it is what every person in the press is going to ask when you send them information and you are looking to get media coverage for library events, library programs, or anything else happening with your library. They want to know why their community is going to care. And that's what marketing really needs to address. The other thing is that marketing is storytelling. Marketing is all about advocacy. Marketing is outreach. It isn't just about promotions. You're here because you recognize that and you know it's important to speak up and speak out for your libraries. And it's probably one of the many hats that you're wearing these days. But it can't just be, quote unquote, other duties as assigned. And when we have goals and we're clear about our expectations and our communications, and we understand that it's all part of how we advocate for our libraries, then I think it makes all of it that much more effective. So this is back to, my pet peeve. I wound up writing blog posts and I wound up doing entire presentations because I have this pet peeve. The point is, and because I see it within the library field, the John Cotton Dana Awards, the PR Exchange, a lot of what they give awards for, it's marketing, it's promotions, it's not strictly public relations. And why do I get so worked about? Well, words matter. And when we use the right terms, especially when we are talking with people who are outside of our libraries, it helps that we're on the same page. We need to be using the same terms. It also helps us to measure what matters. We can't know the effectiveness of our communications efforts, including our public relations efforts, if we have unrealistic expectations for the results of the different types of activities we are doing in marketing communications. And I feel it can set us up for a lack of success because we're expecting the wrong outcomes. We're expecting that PR to deliver something that really is only going to come from paid advertising or promotion or other parts of the marketing umbrella. And I think also there have been some degrees where a lot of library folks who are maybe newer to marketing and communications, well, PR is a warmer, fuzzier term. So they glom onto that because for some of them, using the word marketing has a connotation they don't like. Let's embrace the fact that marketing is strategic storytelling and advocacy. PR is just part of that. So the thing about public relations, the thing about marketing in general is we have to ask, why is the media going to pay attention to your library? And I'd actually love, this is the first asked question I have. This is a question, put it in the chat. Think about something, why would the local media pay attention to your library? Why would one of the stations in Tampa, in Bradenton, in Sarasota, one of the local newspapers, what's a reason you can think of that they're going to pay attention to what's going on in your library? And you can think about that both from the, shall we say, the before times and the why would things are happening in 2020 and it's different. So Jody says we're building a new building. Yes, new buildings. That is actually one reason why they might pay attention to you. Fine free. Oh, there's a really good one to actually get some attention for. And these are great examples. We're going to use some of these later. Hopefully I'm going to write this down. Excellent. Anybody else? Keep dropping into the chat. Think about, is it realistic for the media to pay attention to you for that reason? Is the real reason they're going to pay attention to you the building, or is it maybe something else? How your services benefit the community? Absolutely. Dive even deeper. What does it mean? What's the benefit? Now somebody else went fine free. That's awesome. That may be one of those stories that you push again a second time because maybe people weren't paying attention the first time and they still have in their head an expectation. Well, working on public relations is reminding everybody, hey, you know what? There aren't any fines for us anymore. So think about, what will the reason that the media cares about your library story change based on their audience? Yeah, they will. What might leadership say versus what your customers are saying? Books by mail exploded during COVID. Absolutely. There are different stories that the media has potentially picked up on this year that they may not pay attention to in 21 or 22, or that they didn't pay attention to in 18. So we're having to adapt and pivot this year, but keeping in mind there are ways we can get the media to pay attention and care about what we're doing. So this is just a little brief overview that marketing, let's not think about it in a bad term. Marketing isn't telemarketing, it's not used car sales, and it's not just Black Friday sales. Those might be part of the larger picture. But marketing is about your products, your service, the packaging, the design, your user experience. It's about all those touch points we had back when everybody was in our physical spaces, but now we have a lot of online and digital touch points. Curbside service. Who knew there was a library touch point that most of us never dreamed of or thought about prior to 2020? but it's your social media, it's your customer service. It's, oh, hey, all of the libraries, we decided that everybody in our library is going to wear library color polos with our logos, kind of like the Best Buy squads. But marketing isn't just individual tactics, it's the whole thing, it's the whole umbrella. Tactics are like the shiny objects of marketing. It's what we all fixate on about a social media post, about a flyer, about digital signage, about wayfinding, even about press releases, and it catches attentions, but you still need an overall plan. Public relations fits with your library's overall marketing plan. But sometimes, let's face it, the only time we really think about PR is in moments of, crises, disasters. We can also think about the fact that, 2020, all of a sudden, whoops, now we're really having to think about every library in the same boat across the country thinking about public relations in ways they didn't do so beforehand. And this is one of those areas where I'm not touching necessarily in crisis communications. I have some great recommendations of folks that you absolutely should pay attention to who talk about that. But if anything, 2020 has pointed out that public relations and having an ongoing relationship with the media is essential when we find ourselves in situations like we are now, where it's basically an ongoing extended crisis, and that there can be crises within the crises. Funding, quarantining of materials, if people are having to be forced out of a library space because they aren't following rules. There's lots of different ways that we might have to address something. It's easier when public relations is part of a plan, when you have context, when it's about relationship building. I'd also ask right now that we need to figure out what's being said about our libraries right now. And I'd love to know in the chat, how many of you use any kind of an alert system to track what's being said about your library online? Are you using Google Alerts? Are you using TalkWalker alerts? Have you saved a search in Hootsuite? Are you possibly using Social Mention? I'd love to know if any of you have something like that set up. If you don't, here's a nudge. It's an easy thing to do, setting up Google searches or TalkWalker alerts to find out if your library is being mentioned online, what's being said. Google Alerts, yep, using Hootsuite, Google Alerts, social mentions, absolutely. And I'm going to just drop in the chat. But the other ones that I mentioned that I use as alternatives are TalkWalker alerts and social mention. TalkWalker is by Meltwater. TalkWalker is, they have there's a free version of TalkWalker alerts that they email to you. It's interesting that I find that it catches things that Google Alerts maybe doesn't catch. So marketing and PR. Marketing, we're identifying human needs and wants. We are offering something that satisfies those demands. We're getting a transaction. That transaction could be they signed up for a card, they attended an event, they were there for a story time, they attended a story time digitally online, they took an action. And this was a quote from Cordelia Anderson, and Cordelia actually just gave a speech on crisis communications for us at LMCC, and she's fantastic. Public relations is about relationships, benefits, talking with outside organizations, with the media, between your library as an organization and the entire public on whom your success or failure is tied to. And your public could be, if you're a public library, your public community, your local stakeholders, your local government officials on campuses. It's your deans, your provosts, your boards of directors, your professors, your students, your alumni bodies. You have a public and a connection as well. And it works best when everybody is listening and communicating back and forth. And we often know what our communities and our users and our patrons want from that side of the marketing side. A librarian notices that biographies are popular. You've created a display on biographies. Those books get checked out. All the fantastic digital displays that we're seeing go on right now around BLM or Pride Month, or it's Native American History Month. You notice a staff person notices people coming to the library for a lot of resume help, so they have a resume class. Now you've taken that resume class online. it's still well attended. Things get more complicated if we're in the position of promoting things that didn't arise in response to a need, things that are new, that are different, or the audience has moved on. And those of you in libraries, you know that we tend to respond with a whole lot of printed material. Throw me a chat, in the chat, how many times have you possibly either you're the one responsible or you've been asked to make a flyer? I just have to have a little, commiseration here for make me a flyer syndrome. And in printed material isn't bad. It's probably one of the number one ways in the before times that people who were already in your branch knew about an event that was coming up. They knew about a new program or service. Who knew that 2020 was going to force all of us in terms of libraries to get beyond flyers? Yes, Danielle, all the time. All of a sudden, we're not in our branches. A lot of folks are not physically, we don't have as many people in our branches. We don't have as many people on campus, maybe in some instances, none at all. You cannot possibly rely on a printed flyer. And I don't know that this is going to cure make me a flyer syndrome, but I think it's made a lot of libraries rethink it and to think about all the other different ways that we have a connection that we have to effectively communicate. And PR absolutely fits into that because throwing more flyers at a program or service isn't going to solve problems, and it's certainly not going to help us from a larger community relations need. So we have to be looking to see whether or not our community's needs are being met. Libraries have done that phenomenally this year in pivoting to address how to meet their community needs. So promotion and engagement are part of the entire marketing cycle. Promotion is more what we think of in terms of marketing. It's the megaphone, it's the blasting out, that's the social media, it's the emails, it's your website, it's your newsletters. Engagement and relationship building is where the public relations side and the part of the marketing umbrella it excels. It's where you've got a relationship and there's a message and there's a feedback and it's long term and it's not short term. Social media is more short term, emails are short term. Media relations, public relations is about building the longer term relationship and engagement that is going to help boost your marketing communications, which is why this whole talk is about getting us to think beyond press releases. Press releases are a very short term part of the overall solution in terms of public relations. Public relations is much bigger than just a press release. So I like showing this, and there's a really great analogy about a circus and circus tents. But the notion is explaining what PR is versus marketing, and PR fits in with promotion and advertising, but there's so much else in terms of your customer service, distribution and placement. A lot of libraries didn't think about distribution and placement. All of a sudden, our distribution and placement is totally different in 2020. We're distributing books and materials in the trunks of cars now. We're doing curbside. We are doing so much more electronically. We are promoting electronic services, and people are finally getting it through their heads that your libraries have had those materials for a long time. Now we've got it, finally got it. Under public relations fits media relations, community relations, and publicity. People tend to assume that publicity is what public relations is, and it's not. PR, your press kit, your releases are just one part of public relations, which is the ongoing effort to influence the perception of your library within the community and about building goodwill, which is why I have that problem with a lot of the awards that are given in library land for PR, because so many of the awards are for things that were campaigns that were short term, one time things, when great public relations is about community, media, and long term engagement. So, going back to the question of why is the media going to pay attention to your library? Why are they going to care about the new building? Why are they going to care about fine free? I think we can figure out some really good reasons why they're going to care about fine free. But question, have you heard about the terms earned media versus paid media? And I'll throw that in for a second. Okay, cool. Yes, awesome. As a quick refresher, so earned media, and I'll also say this: there is not one is not better than the other. They are complementary to each other. I love how I'm still talking to my camera, even though I'm not on camera. Earned media, paid media go hand in hand. Earned media is a lot of what press, public relations is. It's where journalists, industry experts, influencers, your local community is talking about you and sharing your message for free. You earned it by the fact of being your awesome library selves. Don't forget that earned media can be, again, those folks that are talking about you in local Facebook groups, the people who are talking about you on your own Facebook page, if you've got a local influencer. Paid media is, well, gee, that's just that. That's advertising, or it's also your own created content. If you've got you could have media that's on both sides. You could have be on a TV ad, you could have a over the top video on demand ad, but you might also get a segment in a local TV news program. So you're on TV, one's paid, one's earned. You have tweets or social media posts that are not from you, they're not sponsored. Maybe you've got guest appearances on a TV, radio, blogs, podcasts, live streams. So there's a lot of different ways you can get to both that earned media that it goes well beyond the press release. And just a few other things that a lot of the reasons why a lot of libraries embrace PR, it's low cost compared to other marketing tactics. Earned and free versus paid. Good to know because we all have budget issues. But it is the long-term play. It's the ongoing relationship building. Marketing has to also happen on an organization wide. It's ongoing, but it includes things like doing your market research, your displays, your branding, your signage, including whether or not you're using branded library bags to put the things in people's trunks. Are you slipping in materials along with the books when you're dropping things off at the curbside takeout? Public relations, it matters because people trust earned media over traditional ads. We know that people still do online searches before they visit someplace, before they donate someplace. It's creating more attention for your libraries, your events, your causes. Well, the whole part about media sources seen as trustworthy, that's a matter of some question the last few years. But especially when we're talking about local media, your local TV channels, your local newspapers, there's still a good deal more trust that's involved there. I also think about it is public relations boosts all of your other efforts. It goes along with and it helps if you're doing a social media campaign. It's complementary to if you did run an ad on video on demand, if you did an ad in a Google search, it complements when you have digital signage or any other, your email marketing, if you send out a newsletter, public relations and your earned media is complementary. So by now I've repeated enough times that it's more than just the press release. It's foundational and holistic, but it absolutely can still drive traffic back to your website, to your social channels, to your buildings themselves. It's helpful. It's part of it has to be core for anybody who's doing library bond issues. If you're up for votes, if any of you are in library systems where you're going to be on a ballot initiative, if you're going to have to be on a ballot initiative to have the funding for the capital for that new building, public relations and having those long-term relationships built is crucial so that you are winning those campaigns. It can help provide a rationale for donations to your friends groups, um, and that every employee and the customer touch points is part of public relations. So just like the rest of marketing, public relations needs to have its own research. Public relations needs smart goals, specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, time bound. Hopefully that is not a new term for anybody here, but it's not, because it's a long-term play. We have to think about goals, and you have to set goals for PR that match the goals for the library overall, that match and complement your marketing goals, your campaign goals. A lot of folks and a lot of libraries, when they're working on public relations, their campaign and their plan, they're going to do a SWOT. They're going to look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for the library and the community that's at play right now. Crisis communications planning. You need a plan for that. That needs to be part of the overall public relations plan. You need to think about it. You need to role play. You need to have those pieces in play ahead of time. Do you know who your allies are? Do you know who's going to come to the library's defense in the case of, say, all of a sudden, you did an event during Pride Month and maybe you had drag queen story time and you are getting an influx of trolls and hates from out of state? What's your plan? Who are your allies? Who's going to come to your defense, and know that ahead of time? Is your staff prepared to handle questions like that about an event? What are the goals and how do they match up with strategy and tactics? That's just as true for public relations as it is for marketing. Who's the audience in the public relations campaign? And the answer isn't everybody in your community. You might have a very different public relations campaign aimed at faculty and deans on campus for your library, and you might have a very different one that was aimed at potentially giving talking points to council persons, to the school board, to other elected officials, and a different one for the heads of civic organizations in your community that might be good library partners. Who are the go-to spokespeople within your library? That it may or may not default to being your directors. It might not default to being the dean of the library. Maybe there's somebody else who has good relationships within the community, who is more comfortable speaking possibly with the media, that is the person you identify as your spokesperson. So for example, libraries doing summer reading programs. Yes, I know that was different in 2020. So normally we announce sorts of things like that. What if instead, public relations, you're building a campaign, you're trying to get more attention for a summer reading program, that you reached out in the community, you talked to see if the mayor or maybe a local author or a local celebrity or celebrity chef would participate in the summer reading program. Maybe they're going to donate something for winners. Maybe they're going to shave his or her head if the kids read 20,000 books over the summer. You can then keep media and influencers posted on that collaboration within the community with press events at the end, with press releases, but it becomes a campaign because you're going to have multiple public relations efforts throughout the summer connected to your summer reading program. Maybe there's a blogging summit with local bloggers, people writing for The Patch and other local community news blogs, that you're going to have a relationship with them where they're going to write stories that maybe the community isn't aware of and a different angle on library events. There are just different ways to think about doing public relations and for you all to be able to do it better. And the main thing is that so that you don't wind up on the back foot if there is a crisis, but more importantly, you're planning it so that public relations doesn't just become about reacting either to a good event, a bad event, or reacting when all of a sudden you're like, oh, let's send a press release because we've got an event going on at the library. Sending press releases out into the void like that is just about as bad as, I have no idea why it's animated like that. That wasn't necessary. But sending press releases out into the void is about as bad as making me another flyer and stapling them up all over the walls of your library. So I'd love to know in the chat what might be, and recognizing that this year is different than so many others, what could a good SMART goal be for public relations in your library, thinking at the next 90 days, for the end of the year going into the next quarter? What would be realistic? And so we have the examples of, we've got a new building that's coming up, you're going fine free. What what might be a goal around fine free? And if somebody else has another example, put it in the chat. And if it's more comfortable for you, you can unmute yourself right now and we can talk about smart goals. But I'd love to know, when are you, for the ones who are going fine free, um, time specific. When are you going fine free? When are we going to back that up to make sure that people are aware that that's happening? Public relations. How would you measure? So that's part of the S and M. That's the M in SMART goals. Is it going to be measuring the number of media pickups for that story? Is it going to be saying that you set a goal, for example, that you want to have the story of the library going fine free in X many local news articles, X many TV station local interest segments, and maybe online in X blog posts. How are you thinking about how are you going to measure it so that you know whether that effort was successful? So I'm not seeing anybody willing to throw in something as a chat on the SMART goals here, but I want you to be thinking about it, and maybe we can come back to that when we unmute and we do some of the exercises. I'm just giving another second. Okay. Toolkits. It's a lot easier to have this media relationship and to not be reactive when you have the materials that you need at hand, and especially right now when you are digital, when you're online, when so many of our spaces are either still restricted or entirely closed. Having a media kit online, it makes the job of the media and the press easier. And honestly, the easier you make their job, the more likely they are going to be to respond to your inquiries and through your stories. Cool. I have an example that's in the chat. We're going to come back to that one. So journalists absolutely will search online and they will look to see if there is a media kit and materials on your website, and they want it all in one place, including the bios, the logos to download, key facts, PDFs, bios of key library staff, headshots. The less work a journalist has to do for any background or any basics, the more likely they're going to work with you on this story and stories in the future. You want to be setting up the library as a go-to resource for the community and for the media on stories just beyond also, the library, and the fact that you have, a pet therapy program or a reading to dogs event. You want to be a go-to resource. So that could mean, like I said, having your fact sheets, having a PDF with a did you know myths versus facts. This is a great place where an infographic works, and where infographics have worked for a number of other libraries to have this as a sheet. You have your circulation statistics. You have your statistics for how many people attended an event in the last year. Let's face it, a lot of the media still has really outdated misperceptions and conceptions about what's going on in the library. We all saw it this year. People still had surprise and shock in the media, like, oh, look at all these e-resources you have. You can get ebooks in the library, and we're all shaking our heads going, oh my God, yes, we've had this for years. Help make it easy for them to say, yep, by the way, did you know we had this many thousand titles available for people to borrow through Hoopla and Canopy and, Libby and Overdrive? Make it easy and make those facts pop out. Because when we get to talking about hooks, key surprising statistics are a great way to hook attention, including of the media person you're trying to, get on their schedule and to get them to pick up your story. If you have an internal approval process and timing where things have to go through supervisors or different levels, having that information and having it ready either at your fingertips or even on your website or in your press release kit is really crucial, because they know whether or not they can expect that you're able to turn around one of their requests really quickly or not. And you're like, nope, too many layers, can't do that. Keep all of your materials in your press kit tight, meaning tight copy wise, short, not more than a page or so a piece. If it's going to be on social media, it's even shorter, short, succinct, ready to go. In terms of social media and public relations, again, why are we on social media? What are we looking to achieve on social media, specifically with public relations? Right now, we're using social media for everything. It's the place where the events are actually happening themselves, as well as we're promoting all of the other services, and we're talking curbside. What's the public relations aspect and tie into social media? That as needed, you have the social media posts that go along to support your PR goals. You've got media alerts. That's where we talked about Google and TalkWalker. You know what's already being talked about. You can set up those alerts so you know which journalists cover the area that you are likely in, literally the geographic area, but also which journalists, which people at the media stations and the TV stations and the press are most likely to be the ones who are going to pay attention and write about stories like what your library has. Keep press release templates on file for yourself. Have them ready to go. Have in your media kit, and this is going to be the next one, all your past press releases, because other journalists are looking at that. They want to know what's been written about you in the past. It's a two-way street in terms of this community building, this communications, this relationship building. You aren't just producing material to be broadcast out the way that we're doing for email blasts and newsletters or flyers or even a lot of social media. It's about making sure we're part of the conversation with the media and helping them have a conversation with their audience. The more we are prepared in advance, the easier all of this is. So just some other things to think about in your media kit. If you've got photos of your library, you might, if you're working on a new building, do you have before and after photos? Do you have photos of the construction that is ongoing? Do you have the artists or the architects' renderings so that the media could easily pick those up and put them in their news story and going, hey, this is what it looks like. This is what it's going to look like soon. Aren't you all excited? Here's the new accessibility. Your logos. Please have your library's logo online along with the use guidelines. Do you have it available in white, in black, in 4-color, square, horizontal? Giving them guidelines on which version to use and when. And here's a personal pet peeve, because I've been going around. I had to go grab sponsors' logos for LMCC, and there are files that are named logo. Honest to God, these are major companies, and I've seen this also from small companies and small brands, and the logo file says logo. I'm like, well, whose? when you name your files, make sure that there's information literally in the file name. BW Oldsmar logo. BW, 4C Pinellas County and your logo, you're in your acronyms. Help the journalists, help anybody else who needs your logos so that they know who it is that they've just downloaded on their hard drives, and they can go find it when they're going to be writing the stories. If you have quotes or testimonials from any of your members of your public, those are great, and if they're great and evergreen, let the journalist pull those are pull quotes, and let them use them potentially as background in other stories. Previous press releases, anything else that potentially helps with publicity. If you want to take a look at some simple media kits, and I'm actually going to, let's see, can I drop the link in? I think the links are in one of the slides towards the end, and you're getting all of the handouts as well. You see I dropped one on the screen. Canva has media kit templates you can look at. Adobe's Spark product has is called their press kit maker. They've got templates as well to make an attractive looking media or press kit that you can put up on relationships. Finding out who's on the beat in your community, who's covering TV, radio, online blogs, local bloggers, local social media influencers, and of course, print media. Create a list or a spreadsheet with the contact information, including, and here's a great tip that I got from some library PR experts, because that's not necessarily me. That's not what I do on a day-to-day basis. Nicole told me, make sure you have a field that says this is their preferred way to communicate. Some of them are going to want you to reach out to them always via email. Others are going to be like, no, my email box is flooded. Call me. Others are going to be like, text me. Some of the others, if they're willing to be contacted via DMs or something like that, or private message on social media, note that. Make sure you know, so that when you are sending them pitches and information and you're reaching out to them to give them a heads up on a story, you're reaching out in their preferred method of communication. Note in your spreadsheet, their coverage style. How do they tend to write? How do they tend to pick up on stories? What is it that they tend to write about most often? Because that's going to fit into your hook. That's going to fit into how we talk to them about our stories. What other hooks have they used in some of their stories? Then obviously you've got the places that are going to be appropriate where you can send your press releases and you have a follow-up plan to follow up with them 1 day, 3 days, 2 weeks later, which is the other reason you got to have your press releases done and send it out well in advance of when an event is happening. And so that you can have the follow-up to say, do you have any additional questions? Hey, we had more pictures shot ahead of this event. Would it help you to have that? Would it help you to have, a photographer on site if you're going to be able to come, to the event? You're not going to just spray and pray. You know how your releases are going to stand out, and you are contacting the sources that are most likely to be working with you. Who are your most vocal supporters and super users, and using those as influencers to help you get messages out. Also note in your press release and your contact information spreadsheet what release sources are paid versus free options. There are paid press release sending services that may or may not make sense for you when you're trying to get local coverage, and it really isn't going to help you when you're in Pinellas County to have something being picked up down in Miami-Dade or in Broward. That's not your service area, or you don't want to being picked up something nationally. But there may be ways when you look at those paid distribution sources to narrow down geographically, and those filters. So, sending a press release. Well, when do we send them? I think the answer has been, for a lot of the libraries in the past, we're going to send them for everything. Back to the very first slide that we talked about. Why should my community care? It's the number one question all the journalists are going to ask. They want to know, why is the story timely, relevant, and newsworthy, and what's in it for me? What's in it for that particular media's audience? And if you've partnered with these folks and you've had contact with them ahead of whatever your event is, before you're sending them a press release, you're going to better know the what's in it for them, and you can tailor your message or your request, even the email where you send the press release to them, with this is what's in it for their audience. So, breaking news: when your library shut its doors to public service in March, well, obviously that's a big deal. That definitely was warranting of a press release. A major event: you have a new building. Yep, that's definitely worthy of it. But you need to tailor the press release to talk about why is it important that you have a new building. Having a new building alone is generally not enough of a news event, depending upon your community and if it's a slow news day. What's in it for them? Why will their community matter? Is it the fact that now your library building is more accessible to the public? Is it has more community meeting space, that you have a maker space for teens, that you have a greater ability to serve seniors and job seekers? What's the angle? And why are they going to write about the fact that you've got this new building? Fine free. Excellent. That's almost newsworthy in and of itself. People aren't going to have to pay fines. But talk about the stories of what was it preventing people from doing if they had fines. What is it going to mean for somebody? Think about a particular user in your library and what it means for them that their fines are being wiped out. If you have a partnership, have you teamed up with another community organization? Have you teamed up with an org on campus? Great, great way to talk about and to have a release for that. Have you done any research, sharing highlights from your own surveys, your user studies? If you've done some research lately that's talking about the use of your electronic resources, and you've had a 200% increase in use of Ancestry and a 1,000% increase in the use of Hoopla, you can talk about that. That's a worthy thing to talk about in a press release. Fine Free is welcoming people back. Actually, yes, talking about what even does it mean to welcome somebody back? Why had they left the library? What were they missing from the library because they had been fearful to come back because of these fines? New management awards. Some of these things are absolutely reasons why you send press releases, but always ask, even when you're talking about staff and leadership, what does it mean for the community? When you're talking awards, it could be ones that your libraries won. It could even be you're putting out a release of, hey, you're sharing the news of relevant literary awards. What's the local tie-in? Is there a connection to a local author? Did a local author win an award? There's a hook that makes it more likely that the media is going to like, oh, my community is going to perk up and pay attention here. So these are some folks I reached out to who are experts and dealing with the media on an everyday basis. I happen to love absolutely everything that Mid-Continent Public Library in Missouri is doing. They also have one of the largest marketing teams I'm aware of in a public library. They're a huge branch system and a really great example. And when I talked to Emily Brown, these are the tips that she gave to share about media relations. And we've covered some of them already about doing your research and knowing what stories your local reporters are covering. What's the commonality? It's going to help you to pitch because you know how they approach their stories. By all means, share your victories, share the coverage that you got in the media and tag them. They love knowing that you saw that they did a story about you. It's a great thing to share on social media. Here's the clip from when they came and they covered us. Here's a clip. Don't forget to make sure you watch, the KNBC Channel 4 story. Share through your channels, your newsletters, your email, your social media, anytime you have a media pickup. Being able to respond quickly, taking any chance that you get. And nowadays it's going to be mostly virtual, and it may be having a virtual coffee chat with local reporters, being able to meet them and to build that relationship. You want to be memorable, you want to stand out, you want to be their go-to resource. Whenever and every time a reporter may reach out to you, even if it's about something that you don't necessarily want coverage of, respond quickly, be ready. Respect their deadlines. The better you are about quick responses, the more they will work with you. I think that's when Emily talked with me and when she talked at LMCC, she kept stressing it's this relationship building. It's the fact that she spends so much of her time in public relations reaching out virtually, in person, on the phone, via social media to media members means that they are so much more likely to actually carry stories about the library, that they're much more likely to send TV crews out there. They're much more likely to write things out there. They want a relationship with you. It is mutually beneficial to them because you're going to make it easy for them to write feel-good stories that their audience loves and reacts well to. If you see, follow them on social media, connect with them on social media as well, amplify their stories. So these are some examples that Emily sent me, and you can find some of them where they've shared again on social media that they have one of their librarians who has gone and done in-studio interviews at the local Fox channel. They have this great feature in studio where there's a smart whiteboard and they can pull it up, and he's showing them how to use various electronic resources. They've gone in studio with a lot of the local radio stations. They've been with the local DJs. They've reached out to different communities and populations beyond news channels on radio. Depending upon the programming, the service, the event that they're getting information for. They have a museum pass program that was very successful. That was the hook that they used during National Library Week, and that the Fox channel came out and did a spot on them where they're showing the museum passes, because again, that's one of those breaking expectations within the media for things that they're not aware that libraries have. So many other things. If your library lets people borrow something that feels unusual, cake pans, cooking kits, 3D printing. Think of all the stories that so many libraries got in the spring for the fact that, well, we've got these idle 3D printers, so let's print face masks and face shields. Fantastic opportunity. There's a chance to revisit those stories in the next year to say, and here's all the other cool things we're doing with our 3D printers. Don't forget we have those. So, tips from Nicole Fowles. Nicole Fowles is the communication manager at the Delaware County District Library in Ohio. And again, also, Nicole is all about building the relationships, that it's never too late or too early. Yes, okay, we can't schedule meetings at our locations right now. Maybe you can have a socially distanced, and maybe that's an opportunity actually to say, hey, our libraries aren't necessarily open to the public, but here's a chance for you to come out socially distanced. We're going to mask this. We're going to do this as safely as possible, but you can see what it looks like to do curbside service from behind the scenes and all of the safety efforts that libraries are taking right now in terms of quarantine. I've seen a lot of comments in library groups where patrons are still concerned. They're like, well, why can't I get my materials? Why is it showing up that it's still checked out to me? I returned my materials, and like, well, because they're in quarantine. Show, don't tell. Even if it's you taking the pictures and sending them to the local media, you taking video and sending it to local media, or like, help us tell this story. This is all the cool things that are going on behind the scenes. This is all the steps we're taking to have the safest experience possible. Safety for our staff, safety for our patrons. We're looking out for you. If you're able to invite them in and to see that, even better. Your media packet, every time if you're meeting with somebody in person, when Nicole goes and has a networking meeting, if she's having an informal coffee or a lunch, she has her media packet ready. And in this case, Nicole told me that she absolutely does take a physical folder packet if she's meeting with somebody one-on-one. So she gives them, the annual report, a one-sheet fast facts, the latest newsletter that they've sent out. She gives them, some library swag. If they don't already have a library card, she gets them one, or she has the form for, or she shows them also, she takes them a sample physical library card so that they can use that in their, possibly in their clips, that they actually see, feel, look what one looks like. You don't have to walk them through everything that's in the packet. It's just a quick grab it and go. It's a quick touch. You can mention what's in there and obviously refer them back to everything that's in your online media kit as well. I'd love to know how many of you all have media kits in your libraries right now. How many of you have media kits that are either online? How many of you have anything in terms of a physical media kit? Throw that in the chat for me while I take another sip of my iced tea. And I'm going to keep walking through because you're going to get all of these, because I want to make sure actually to take a break and do some of the exercises here. Once again, I have more slides than I could possibly imaginably go through. So more tips, from Nicole, and some of these tips, if we can't physically be there and show them and give them our talking points, we figure out a way that we can transition and to do that online. She talks with local media to figure out what ideas are they looking for, what fits with them. Do they have a weekly column? Do they need regular content? If you're able to take pictures and high quality photos from them, and that helps them on a weekly basis. Knowing what their editorial calendar and with calendar of events communicate with that with them well in advance is all incredibly helpful. All right, you have one librarian, one volunteer, so you do not currently have a media kit. Yeah, excellent project. And so I'm actually going to skip through some of Nicole's crisis comms tips, um, and looking beyond because I want to get to the point where we actually talk about the media kits really quickly. Stories. So we often talk about we're trying to get attention, and we send out press releases ahead of library events and library programming. Tough truth, folks, the programming itself isn't the story. um, if you have a program and it's a pop-up session with a local fabric art expert, the fact that it's a local fabric art expert is more of a hook. That's a story. You have therapy dogs that the kids get to read to in the branch. Okay, yes, dogs and kids are more likely to get you press release, press attention no matter what. But the fact that it helps the kid overcome stuttering or a reading anxiety is the hook, not just the fact that the dogs are there. So you have Tumble Books as an app that's an electronic resource. The fact that Tumble Books helps a grandmother download and read with the grandchild that she is the primary caregiver for during the week because mom does shift work, that's a story. If you provide welcome kits and books in native languages with community partners to new immigrants and to refugees, that's the story. So think stories all of the time. Again, what's in it for them? What's in it for the media? Why does your community love your library? Do you have stories? Do you have examples? Do you have examples to share of what your patrons have said about the top reason they come to you? If you've gotten feedback on social media this year about why they love curbside takeout, this is not a burger, but you know what I meant. The virtual storytelling, be saving those comments because that is information that can go to the media in the future as well as right now. Hooks is what I want us to work on, um, and what I'm going to send you an example for in case we don't have a chance to dive into them deeper. Hook is how you get the attention. Hook is how you're going to get past the info overload in our world. It's your headline. There's two things to think about in the hook. You're using the hook to get the media's attention on why they're going to pick up your press release, why they're going to listen to you, why they're going to listen to your pitch, why this story. That hook is also what they're going to use in their story to hook their audience's attention. Your products, services, your library's events have to have a hook, and the fact that you have that service, that event isn't a hook enough. It's not enough. Hooks can hide from us. We have to think about it. We have to practice it. They're emotionally driven. They're quick. They are facts. They're statistics. They're answering a question that you need a way to really quickly capture attention. You can even think about the hooks that songwriters use and music lovers use. What is it that catches your attention so you keep listening to that song? Different types of media need different types of hooks. Anything that's a very visual media, you're going to have a visually attention grabbing image to go along with the text that captures their attention. If it's radio and it's a podcast, then it might be you're having a discussion, a conversation. It's controversial. It's you're attacking you're coming at something from a different side, different point of view. Why are they going to keep listening in that conversation? So hooks, like I said, it can be an image, short. They're factual, they're objective, they are not sensational. This isn't purely a clickbait type of thing, though there's a reason why we click on stuff like that. The main thing is it can't be self-interested. In other words, it's not just about the library, it's about the community, it's about your patrons, it's about your users, your students on campus, and the media's audience as well. And the main thing is it takes practice. You got to write a bunch of them, and you got to have to practice. And hopefully we have some time here where we can actually do that, and I'm going to send you some exercises where we can do that. The other thing that goes along with getting attention are pull questions. Pulling questions are we're painting a picture in a situation, a problem that your library is solving, a problem that a particular electronic resource, a database, an event is helping to solve. There's power and emotion there. There's also pull questions are different than pull quotes. Pull quotes are key in terms of your press release. There's a quote from a staff, a patron, a user, somebody who attended an event that gets attention that the media is going to be like, be able to use that's very succinct. So I actually want to skip. So pull questions, what is it in terms of libraries examples that you have resume databases, you have resume writing classes. What is it? What's the example that improves a job hunter's life by having access to those resources? It's a library program with a seasonal twist. I know a library in Massachusetts that did a pumpkin carving contest in the community. There's a seasonal twist. It's time sensitive, which makes it more likely that certain media is going to pick that up. We've already talked about some of these things. Here's the anatomy of a press release. You're keeping it short, you're keeping it simple, you're avoiding cliches. You're not talking about this is the best program ever. Everybody thinks theirs is the best program, the best service. The average press release is actually quite short at 500 or so words. Have it double and triple checked. Make sure somebody else in your library goes over it, that it's meeting your goals, that it has a hook and is going to grab somebody's attention, that it's not overly long. Again, hooks and headlines are short, 60 to 100 characters. Dateline, for example, is this for immediate release or you're sending it to them in advance? Are you telling them when the information can be released? Opening paragraphs succinctly summarize what you're announcing, 1 to 2 sentences. It might help for you to write the body copy and then come back to your opening paragraph, what journalists refer to as the lead. The body copy is going to be where you have the 1 to 3 key messages. There's a succinct story with that message. That's where those pull quotes are available. The about us and contact information is boilerplate type of stuff that's going to be the same almost no matter what type of press release you send out. There's a link here. This is a little more of a classic press release. I highly recommend the site pr.com and how to write a press release. And again, you can see it's short, it's sweet, it's simple. This is from journalism. Yes, it's from CoSchedule, but this is the traditional inverted pyramid. It helps us if we think like journalists. We make their jobs easier, which makes it more likely they're going to pick up and talk about the events we want them to talk about in press releases, that those events are and press releases are more tailored to them, including you've got the 5 W's, the who, the what, the why, the where, the when. So no spraying and praying. Don't send every release to every media contact. Which ones are more likely to talk about if it's electronic resources? Who's more likely to talk about if it's the library building? Who's more likely to talk about it if you're going fine free versus you're having an online event, you're having an online author talk? Who in the media is most likely to talk about those specific things that you are looking for attention on? And this is where it gets also back to the fact that you may not be sending releases for everything. Be strategic. What do you most want in the next 90 days to get media attention on, and work backwards so that you can be working from now to having that story published in a timely manner. This is using the same formula almost for a press release, but this is the email that you send to a media contact asking them for publicity. So again, you've got your good headline. You're using your hook and you're using it to catch the attention of the reporter and of your meeting contact. Timing, the reasons why your hook, why it's a great story, what's in it for them. the links to the information in your media kit that's going to make their life easy. Because look, there's your bios, there's your headlines, there's your spokesperson, there's your contact details, boom. So, also, the advice from Emily and Nicole and Cordelia is don't be surprised if there's no immediate reply, especially if you haven't yet built up a strong media relations and a relationship. Have a follow up plan ready. What is it going to look like when you send them email 2 and email 3? Are you calling them at some point? What does your spreadsheet have to say about their preferred contacts? If it's someone you've built a relationship with, call them up if you don't get an answer to your email. If you can't help them, if you're not going to have a good, if this isn't a good fit, thank them for their time. Ask them about upcoming features that they have. If there's anything else you and your library can help them with in creating stories. But you're usually going to follow up at least 3 times. Once a week after you've sent them the message, once after 2 weeks, once after 4 weeks, which is why we're working backwards from the major events, the major news you want covered, that you can't just send a press release the day before an event. You can't even just send it the week before the event. They have deadlines. They need a heads up, and you can't rely on the fact that the first email you sent to them is actually going to be found, in their inboxes. Just a few more examples from my friends over at Mid-Continent. They have a Thai library, a Thai-brary. So they got people to come out and they got media attention for that. They have a fantastic Midwest genealogy center. So they specifically decided they were targeting National Family History Month, and they worked their public relations campaign backwards from there. So they got folks in interviews, not only with the library staff, but with patrons who were using the genealogy center. Cordelia seen some information that they used the library's transform materials from ALA and from the I Love Libraries campaign, and it made it really easy to celebrate during National Library Week because so many of the materials were already ready. Press releases, templates, all of it could be done, and they didn't have to reinvent the wheel. They weren't competing with themselves. And they actually, they got written up then also by Libraries Transform for the example of how they made those materials go into use. You're here, which is huge because that means you're already on your way to more successful media communications, media relationships. Continue to be creative, continue to be helpful. Be willing to look outside the box in terms of public relations and beyond the press release. Do keep things, on message. These are great examples if you want to take a look at. You heard me, I have my own, pet peeve regarding the naming of things, but they are fantastic examples from the John Cotton Dana Awards, from the PR Exchange, from the Library Journal Marketer of the Year, taking a look at what PRSA does for their awards, and write-ups of campaigns from the Marketing Library Services as newsletter, who I used to work for. So just some examples, some additional resources. If you haven't checked out Haro, check out Haro. Follow up on Twitter. There are some excellent resources here in terms of writing electronic news releases, media kits, that I have mentioned. Just a couple of sample press releases is there as well, including one from the New York Public Library. But I want to stop. I want to talk about questions, and I want to talk about hooks. I want us to talk in the chat and/or to unmute your mics, because I want us to talk about the examples that you gave us with the buildings, with going fine free, with anything else that you all have in mind that's coming up in the next 90 days. What's a hook? Let's talk about finding a hook for your library stories. And so that's how you can find me. That here's where I admit that the blog hasn't been very well kept up to date lately. But obviously you're getting all of the handouts as well. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go back over here. So there's a chance. I'd like to chat with you. I want to hear more examples. what's going on in your libraries, and let's work together. This is, the interactive part where you can ask questions, and we can work together on writing hooks for your library event. And a chance to talk again about where you might start in terms of creating media kits. So feel free to either put something in the chat or to unmute yourself. This is your time to let's ask questions, and let's work on getting PR to be something that's more manageable for you in your libraries right now. And because I've been talking too long. Let me go find Kara, you put one in the chat. Let me go find that one. We're getting new lockers outside our building for after hours pickup. That's fascinating. They should be ready in the next couple of weeks, and we'll go on social media and our local online news. Kara, you've already talked to local news media, that you've already sent out information and they're writing up the story? I'd love to know a little bit more about what's going on with that.
We have not yet put anything out. Right now, they're still set up outside. They got delivered last week, and we haven't had the people come in to train us on them or unwrap them or anything yet. So we're still in that very beginning stage.
It might be a great opportunity, if you can, take pictures of them now as they're being delivered. Take pictures of them unwrapping. Take pictures after they've been unwrapped, and like literally somebody using them. Because if you can take those pictures because you're on site, that may save time from journalists who don't have to send somebody out to your location. Are those types of pictures something that you can take?
Absolutely.
Excellent. And that may also be one of those things where if you have a local media contact, send them the before pictures and say, we're really excited. This is something that we're doing to keep our patrons and our community safe, and to give folks an opportunity to get library materials. They were just delivered. They're going to be ready in approximately blank. So you're giving them a heads up that the story is coming, and you can find out and ask them. It's like, hey, what's in your schedule? What's in your cycle coming up? When would be a good time to schedule a follow-up to basically coincide with when the lockers are ready? Because you don't want the story to come out until the lockers are ready, but you're giving them a heads up in the media that this is coming, that we're really excited. And hey, this is what this thing looks like. You could even send them the information, a brochure from the manufacturer that says, here's the information about the lockers and what they can do. You could also, beyond public relations, but in social media, great one to start teasing it. Tease, a portion of the lockers that are all wrapped up, and you're like, we're so excited to be able to unwrap this soon. And then you get to show people pictures of them being unwrapped and being set up, and start building the anticipation there on social media as well, because that's a pretty exciting. I'd love to see these pictures too. Anybody else? Recommendations for building a media kit for a very small but very mighty library. Oh, also Michelle, what materials do you have right now? Are you able to put things onto your library's website?
I unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can.
Oh, okay, awesome. I'm catching up to other people that have been in the library for a while, but we do have one librarian who handles really everything. There is no other person that does our media pages. She basically does everything, and I'm looking for ways to help her. And my experience is a professional writer and editor, trade publications for over 20 years. So I've got the writing and the media kit stuff. Yep. From my days back in magazines, but as far as transitioning it to a library where we don't really have a lot of programming, a lot of stuff, we are just a local resource for basically a retired community, a tourism community. So we really miss having a lot of people coming back into the library. Sure. We're very limited right now. I guess there's a question in here somewhere. What kind of materials would you recommend for just a small, like the annual report maybe, or is that boring stuff?
Annual report's a good place to start. I might say, because you've got the experience and the writing skills, take the annual report and pick out the most interesting bits from it. That you can create a one-page one page fact sheet, you know,
Okay.
and make it look attractive. Go check out Canva. Go check out Adobe Spark. You know, you could make it an infographic. You could have it as a print only in Word as a PDF. But
Mhm.
I'd say pulling out some key facts from the annual report, maybe even key social media stats that you've got. If you've done any online events this year while you've been, you know, potentially closed, include those, literally just one page with some key did you know items. Having that, having a couple of pictures of the library's building, having a couple of your logo is the basics. You're then at least giving the media something to show that when they talk about you, here's the building we're talking about. Here's a nice picture of the inside of the library that eventually everybody else is going to be able to see, and some key facts, because you've taken out, they don't have to write background now. You've done that for them. And, you know, I think that simplifies it. And then you can add on as you go, but that would be like the basic starter kit
All right. Thank you very much.
of sorts. Yeah. Questions from anybody else? Let's see. Julie, Jasmine, Danielle, weren't you at LMCC? I think you're. I feel like your name is very familiar. That we've possibly been in a group or something else online recently together. Yes, thank you for. Yeah, I have not killed all of my brain cells in the last week. That's excellent. So tell me also about the rest of your libraries. Where in the area are you? Small library? Because here's the part where Vicky sent me the spreadsheet and I haven't checked it lately. So, you know, drop me in chat. Who's in one of these smaller branch systems? Who might be in one of the community colleges or one of the university libraries? Where you all have a little bit of an advantage in that somebody else has already probably put together a brand kit. You have your brand logos and you have your style guides in that respect as well. Anybody else who sent any press releases in the past few months? And you know, what was the reaction? What was the response like to those? Anything related to curbside, to online story hours? Um, you gonna make me pick on folks here? What other what questions? What's something that you'd like to tackle in the next month, the next 90 days? Are library marketers in demand? Ooh, that's a really great question, Michelle. You know, honestly, I'd say yes. That it's funny, both anecdotally and speaking as somebody who puts on the only conference dedicated to this topic, that our attendance keeps growing. And not only that, but every year we keep finding more people who are first-time attendees and more folks who are coming from library systems who are now starting to hire people who have more marketing background, PR background, former journalists, former writers, graphics people. More library systems are now hiring those folks and figuring we're going to be able to teach you our library and our system. And it would be easier to do that than have folks who are specialists in reference and children's services and programming learn and do everything that's related to marketing. The funny thing, of course, is that the job titles are all over the board. We once did a search in LinkedIn and there's like 45 different job titles that all correspond to people doing some aspect of library marketing and communications. But I've definitely seen more people coming in with backgrounds in journalism, public relations, media, which can be really helpful. Some of it depends on the area geographically and the size of the library, whether they're able to hire even one person to handle marketing, let alone the library systems that are hiring teams. Are there freelance library marketers? That's a really good question. I guess you could argue that I'm an independent consultant in library marketing. Yes, but I do mostly training and teaching and consulting with other libraries and getting them trained to do it themselves. There probably are libraries that are hiring and outsourcing some of those tasks, but a lot of them, because of if they're, being public funded or community organizations, may feel like that they don't want to or can't outsource a lot of the work that they do in terms of graphics, or other materials. So it depends, honestly. Um, I certainly know some folks who would probably love to be able to do that on a freelance basis, um, as well. So, but I'd really love to know any other examples from anybody, what they've been doing, what might have gotten picked up or gotten any traction in the media this past year. We talked about our library marketing people busy. I think if anything, 2020, the people in library staffs who maybe have been the busiest are my friends who are in library marketing and communications. They're the ones who had the social media account keys, and all of a sudden now social media is events, it's public relations, it's media relations, it's promotions, it's marketing, it's everything is now happening online. Plus all of the stories about getting picked up of, yes, we have Hoopla. Yes, we have electronic resources. Um, Julie saying St. Pete Beach Public Library. We're offering individual family story times by appointment. Oh, interesting. And curbside pickup. And we send the information to local newspapers and we post it on Facebook. Cool, Julie. I'd love to know, have you built relationships with the local newspapers? What have been like? Have they been running stories? What have those stories been like? I'd love to know some of the hooks you might have used in your press releases. And we could also all talk here and possibly put in the chat the great hooks about individual story times. Let's see if I can brainstorm here off the top of my head. And feel free if you'd like to unmute and chat. Hooks there could, things like what the library is doing to ensure ensuring patron safety and family engagement. I'm thinking of what's the interesting twist in the story to the individual family story time. Some local newspapers we used for a while stopped publishing. Oh, wow, that's rough. Our events on hold has been difficult to maintain a relationship with the media. It's a really tough one, and I guess the question is, how likely are local media to run stories about the online events that you're doing? And it might be, I think a lot of libraries use public relations and media and sending press releases to get butts in seats at physical events and story times. And 2020 may be forcing us to rethink it and say, look, we want the long-term exposure to the fact that we do story times in general, and now we're doing individual story times, and this is how we're safely doing story times. And oh, hey, did you know we got permission from publishers to be able to read books via Facebook, and this is how we managed it? That it's not about using public relations to guide people to a specific event, but it's how do you get general awareness in the community that you are having the online events, and you're driving them back to either your Facebook page, your library. It'd be easier to drive them to your library's website, where you're then listing the online events that they can attend if they are a member of your community. I think it may be even reaching out to the local media and asking them, hey, I recognize things are tough right now. What would help you? What stories are you looking for? What stories are you seeing engagement in your local papers? How can we as the library help you? And it might be pitching them the story of how story time looks different in 2020 and how libraries have safely gone on with that rather than an individual program or event. And that may be something that we learn to do going forward in the future as well. And we've got about 4 more minutes. So any other questions, thoughts? Because I know that we have a hard stop at 1:30. I want to thank you all for being here with me. I hope this is helpful. And yes, we did speed through some of the last. You're going to get all of the slides and the handouts. I'm also going to send to Vicki to give to you. It's a exercise on doing hooks and just some examples to think about to write hooks. If you do nothing else, get your basic media kit online. Get your one pager fact sheet to help your media. Reach out to local media and press and ask them what's on their calendars, what's going on, what's their editorial schedule, how can you help them help you. And then the third is literally any got going on. Story times, take Find Free, take the new library building, anything that's coming up in the next 90 days, and ask the what's in it for me question. What's the deeper question? How is this thing benefiting the community? What is the emotional connection that we can make in a 1 to 2 sentences that's going to be the hook that's A, going to grab the media's attention, and B, grab the audience's attention when the media puts it out there? Those things are going to boost your public relations immensely. So I appreciate the kind words in the chat. I hope that the slides help you, that it helps you lay out what's in a good press release, the basics of a media kit, that any size of library can do this. You're just going to be, maybe a little more limited in terms of how much outreach that you can do. It's a lot to think about. I'm trying not to put more on people's plates, but honestly, it might be easier for you if you don't have to keep thinking, got to send a press release this week, got to send a press release this week. Think about, where do you most want attention? Where is the media most likely to be able to help you and you to help them? And it might be fewer press releases, but it might mean more phone calls and emails to just continue checking in with the local media so that you continue to stay on their radar, because eventually things are going to change in 2021 and beyond, and you want to still be able to have a connection with the local media so that you can remain in that relationship, so they can continue to help you, and you're part of the community, they're part of the community. So thank you all so very much for being here. Vicki, was there anything else you want to take care of your housekeeping matters here while you've got a minute to go?
Thanks everyone for attending. I appreciate it. And everyone have a great rest of the day, and the recording will go out later today.